Hi everyone, welcome to my channel Coding Clean. Today we are going to talk about arrays in C++. So what is an array? Well, a single variable stores a single value. What if we want to store more than one values of the same type? So for instance, in this diagram, I want to store 5 integers. If you want to store more than one values of the same type, you use arrays in C++. So this is the memory representation of the array. Array has a name which we call list here, and then it has a size, and the size of the array is the number of elements which can be stored in the array. So it's the maximum capacity of the array, that how many elements can be stored. If you count these values, the size is 5. There are 5 memory locations: 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And every memory location will have some memory address. But in C++, we use indices, right? Indices is like an address of each block of memory. And this is one big block of memory in computer's RAM. Arrays are stored in contiguous block of memory. So each block is next to another block. There is nothing else between two blocks of the array. So this is one big chunk of memory, and it's been divided into 5 components, or you can say memory cells, each storing a single integer. So if the size of the integer on your computer system is 4 bytes, then every location, the first one, index 0, this location will be a 4 bytes. Then this second location will be a 4 bytes. The third will be a 4 bytes, and so on and so forth. So the total size of the array is the number of locations or the number of elements in the array multiplied by 4. So there are 5 blocks here. So 5 multiplied by 4 equals to 20 bytes. So the size of this whole array is going to be 20 bytes based on the size, and the size is 5, right? Now to declare this kind of array in C++ for storing integers, I have commented the code. I'm going to come here and say what is the type of the array. It's going to be int. It's going to store all integers. Remember that in array in C++ and most programming languages, it stores elements of the same type. So the type of the elements inside the array must be the same. You cannot store integers and characters together. Either the array will store all integers or all characters or all string. So you must specify the data type first, then you type the name of the array, we're going to call it list, and then within the square brackets, right, these are called square brackets, you specify the size, and the size here is 5 because there are 5 memory locations inside the array. And then we're going to put semicolon to end the declaration. So just like a variable, it's very similar. The only difference is that we now are using these brackets notation, and we specify some integer value which represent the size of the array. If you want to initialize the array at the time of declaring, right, just like you declare a variable and then you put some initial value inside that variable. If you want to declare an array and put initial values, like I have already initialized this array 100, 200, 300, 400, and 500, you can use this syntax. You type the data type, let's call it list2, and then you specify the square brackets, but you do not type the size because we are initializing the values, and then you put the opening curly bracket, and then you type all these values and separate it by comma. Remember, 200, comma, 300, 400, and 500, and do not put a comma after the last item because there are no more items to come. So this is called array declaration and initialization. The question that I was asking, that how do you access individual values or elements of the array, because it's not a single variable, it's a data structure, it stores multiple values. So for example, if you want to access the third value, which is 300, then you have to use this index, right? The first index of the array will always be 0, the second will be 1, 2, 3, 4 in this sequential order, and the last index will always be array size minus 1. So the size of the array is 5, and you subtract 1 from the size. 5 minus 1, you get the index of the last element, right? So the last index of any array will be size minus 1. So let me just See out on screen, the third item, which is 300, I'm going to type list 2 because these values are in list 2. This is list 2, the name of the second array. And then you use the square brackets and then you specify the index number. So the index number is 2 here. I'm going to specify 2 and let's put an indel, save changes, compile the code. There is no warning, and I'm going to hide this diagram for the time being. I'm going to run the program and we are going to see the value 300. Similarly, if you want to, for example, display the last value, you want to access the last value, I'm going to just bring that diagram back. Last value has the index 4. Remember, the indices is the mechanism by which we can access the individual elements of the array. So I'm going to specify 4 instead of 2. Now, when we run the code, it's going to display the last value. If I compile it and then run it, we're going to see 500 right here. Okay, 500. You want to access all the elements of the array, you can use a for loop because all these elements are next to one another. There is nothing between these adjacent memory locations, so we can use the for loop. And I'm going to just comment out this line, int I equals 0, because the first element has the index 0. So do not begin your counter variable from 1. If you begin from 1, you are going to skip the first value and the array elements from 1 will be displayed sequentially like this, right? So be very careful. You have to begin with 0 and then I less than 5 and then I plus plus. Less than 5 because we begin with 0, so 0 up to 4, we are going to display the values up to 4 index, and when it becomes 5, we're going to break the loop. And then the body of the for loop, and we're going to say cout list 2, which is the name of the array, and then inside these square brackets, we're going to specify I. Why do we do that? Because the value of I in the beginning will be 0, so list of 2, 0 means the first value, right? Then list of 1, list of 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this counter variable I will be incremented in each cycle and we are going to get the index number. So I'm going to say comma and then space. I want to display a comma separated list, and then I'm going to just insert a blank line. So let's just compile the code and execute the program, and you're going to see 100, 200, 300, 400 and 500, right? Sometimes we want to take input from the user. Here we have hard coded the values of the array. We have initialized it in our code, but most of the time you want to take input from the user. Let's say we want the user to enter 5 integers. To do that, we are going to just comment out this line, and we are going to use this list of 5 because we have just declared this array and we haven't stored anything in this list. Taking input from user, and then we're going to use the for loop. So I'm going to say for int I equals 0, I less than 5, I plus plus, and then within the body of the for loop, we are going to display a prompt to the user, enter an integer. This message will be displayed to the user on each cycle of the for loop. And then we're going to use the cin statement and we're going to say list of I, right? So the I value is 0 in the beginning, so the first location will get the user input, and then I will be incremented and list of 1 and list of 2 and list of 3. So this loop will execute 5 times, and each time the user will see this message on screen, and then the user will type in some value. And let's execute the program. So we see the prompt, enter an integer. I'm going to say, let's say 10, and then the second cycle of the for loop says enter an integer. I'm going to say 20, then 30, then 40, and after typing each value, I press enter on the keyboard, then 50. When I enter the last value, 50, if I hit enter on the keyboard, the last loop will display the values 10, 20, 30, 40, and 50. Right? So this is all about arrays. We are going to talk more and more about arrays, and we're going to write more programs. For the time being, thanks for watching. See you next time. Happy coding.